If you want Colts talk all year long, you're in the right place.
Fires upfield into the end zone. It is caught. Jelani Woods, touchdown. He's going to fire upfield. It's broken up. Tipped and intercepted by the Colts.
This is the official Colts Podcast, giving you an updated look at what's new with the Horseshoes.
Colts have it. Interception. 2 seconds left, and the Colts are going to win.
In the Indiana Union Construction Industry radio studio, let's get the podcast started.
Yes, let's do it. Welcome back, everybody. This is the last official Colts podcast before training camp fires up next week. It's here. The 2023 season is on the near horizon. Check it all out. Head to Colts Camp for all the practice times and to download your free tickets. One-stop shop, Colts.com/camp. We're brought to you on the podcast by WynnBet. I'm Matt Taylor. Good to be back. Casey Vallier is back in studio. J.J. Stankevitz is back in the office for the first time since April 15th. How you doing? Hey, it's summer now, JJ.
Yeah,
welcome back, buddy. It's a little hot around here, these parts.
You know, other people took the week after the 4th off, too, in this building. Yet I'm getting all this, I haven't been in since it was spring. Like, I mean,
because we missed you, that's why.
I missed you guys, too.
See, I took time off, and nobody realized I took time off. That's when you know. You're like, oh, wow, uh-oh.
Well, I do the long weekend. The long weekend is my jam, and that's why you kind of slip away.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows you're gone, but you feel like you're gone, but you don't come back to a pile of work.
Now,
that's the sweet spot right
when
there.
you do a long weekend, are you a take Friday and Monday off, or are you take a Thursday, Friday off guy?
Well, I've been doing just Fridays. If I'm going to do a long weekend, I much prefer to do it at the end of the week as compared to have it trickle over into the beginning of the week, because on Monday, everybody's firing you emails, everybody's back into work, everybody's back into the groove at work. And so if you take that day off when everybody else is working, you just feel like you have one eye on work anyways.
Yeah, you can't really decompress and take the advantage of taking time off.
So it's more 4-day weekend, Thursday, Friday. We say that, JJ, because, boy, you had a really exciting and interesting and fascinating trip to Europe. Tell us about it if you can. If you can give us the 2-minute elevator pitch on all that you did and saw and the culture you experienced.
So it started with one of my best friends. He had a wedding at a castle outside of Edinburgh in Scotland. It was supposed to be in 2020. It's now 2023.
Yep.
For reasons that everyone listening to this podcast will know.
Good old COVID.
Yeah, good old COVID. Knocking it. So they were supposed to get married in the summer of 2020. They got legally married that fall over Zoom. And then their wedding got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back to the point where they brought their 9-month-old daughter along.
Whoa.
They've been married for 2.5 years. It was more
Wow.
of a celebration. But that was lovely. Got to stay at a castle, which was pretty cool.
Pretty awesome.
And then...
Now, when you say you stayed at a castle, like, is it outfitted with, I mean, stupid question, I understand. I mean, is it modern, I guess?
Yeah, I'm not staying in, like Rapunzel's tower or anything. Like,
let down your head.
There was a bed and a shower, and it was very nice. But it was very much, like my wife walked in and she goes, "This is just like Downton Abbey of like
so they had
and everything."
There was running water.
Yeah,
stuff.
Yes, there was plumbing.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a pit for you to go to the bathroom in. No, it was.
I'm
very
not following
nice.
that action in the pit.
No. But so there was a keep at the castle, like where you like walk up to the top of the castle. And the stairs for that were not designed for 21st century feet, let alone the women, including my wife, who were wearing heels.
Oh, yeah.
Not great.
Watch your step, literally.
The steps were about, you could probably, like, there may be, 4 inches in width.
Wow.
Pretty tough. No one sprained an ankle. That was good.
Mm-hmm.
So we made it out
So
of
you
there.
went it was early in the night that you went up there.
Yeah, it was for the ceremony.
I mean, it's a wedding, so there's some alcoholic beverages involved, so you try to,
right,
smart,
yeah,
understand.
before the whiskey really hit.
Take that into consideration.
Right.
So from there, we spent another night in Edinburgh, which is a lovely city. Cannot recommend it enough. I prefer it heavily over London.
Wow.
Having been to London only in the UK. It's just easier to get around. It's not as overwhelming. There's some really cool stuff. We were randomly there in Edinburgh for King Charles's Scottish coronation, which is a thing that nobody in the city really cared about. Like, literally, I asked a bartender, "Hey, what's the deal with this? Like, King Charles is here, and it's his coronation?" And she goes, "Yeah, it's mostly for the people down south." In, like, a very, like, down south, like in England.
Like a derogatory way?
Yeah, like in a derogatory way.
Interesting.
Okay.
That was interesting learning about how
Sure.
the Scottish are just like, hey, we don't care about the crown at all, or the royals, or any of that stuff. So from there, we took a flight on Ryanair, which is the European low-cost budget airline that has a not-so-sterling reputation. It's totally fine.
Spirit.
You're here. You
Allegiant.
made it.
Compared to people who have flown Ryanair and Spirit have been like, Spirit's like, you're flying like first class compared to Ryanair. It was fine. We made it to our destination. We went to Bordeaux in France, which also randomly we were in Bordeaux during the Tour de France's stop in Bordeaux.
Oh, cool.
Oh, wow, okay.
Very
Didn't see the bikes though, because we went on a winery tour. But went
I just
to,
rather drink.
Yeah, well, I mean, pretty much. But we went to like the Tour de France fan park and stuff, and it was like randomly we showed up to like 2 big events. Had no idea they
That's
were
pretty
even going on. But the weird small world thing that happened was we get in this minivan to go to these tours of these chateaus in Bordeaux, like a world-renowned wine region. And, the tour guide's like, oh, where are you from? We're like, we're from Indianapolis. We used to live in Chicago because, frankly, no one in Europe really knows much about Indianapolis unless they're racing fans. So we can say Chicago. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know Chicago. And the tour guide goes, oh, yeah, there's a couple on this tour from Chicago. So I go and I sit down in the back of the van, and this couple gets in, this American couple. And I'm like, hey, you must be the couple from Chicago. And I look at this guy, and he looks at me. And he goes, JJ? And I'm like, Patrick. And it was a guy I worked with at Comcast Sportsnet Chicago.
Oh, my God.
He was a producer there when I worked there covering Notre Dame and the Bears. So we spent the entire 40-minute ride to these chateaus just like reminiscing about the people we worked with and the time we had there.
Oh, my gosh.
Talking about, going in the green room with Ozzie Guillen and Lance Briggs.
Small world, brother.
I mean, such a small world. It was crazy, but Bordeaux is incredible. One of my favorite cities I've ever been to. The language barrier was pretty much non-existent. A lot of people there spoke English.
Oh,
so
nice.
Didn't have to worry about trying to speak French.
Yeah.
Except to say, bonjour and merci a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Oui. That's
I mean, I tried not to do
I'm
that
a
one because that might be a
5-year-old
little
at heart,
offensive
so,
because
yeah.
otherwise I'd be like, oui, oui,
Exactly.
all over the place.
Don't
but I
worry.
tried not to do that.
Don't worry. You're fine.
And then from there we went to Paris for a night, and then we flew back to the States. So it was an incredible
Wow.
trip. But let me just say, the real MVPs of this trip are Jim and Kathy Stankevitz for watching our 2 boys who did not come to Europe with us.
What was the total count? 6 days?
8 days.
8 days.
And
Oh, man.
let me tell you about how bad this was for them. So our boys are in daycare 3 days a week in the summer. But one of those days when we were gone was the 4th of July, where daycare was not open.
Yeah.
So they went to daycare on a Monday. 4th of July, they were off. On the 4th of July, the boys both got sick, so they had to stay home on Wednesday. So they were home. My parents watched these kids, these 2 3-year-olds, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
I mean, whatever you're paying them, double it.
I
I
mean,
know
yeah.
you're not paying them, but
we looked at
you get what I'm
each
saying.
other. We looked at each other, and we're like, I don't know how we can repay my parents. And I was like, by probably not asking them to do this again.
ever
Yeah, they turn
again.
like 16, then it's like, all right, I think we've hit our window where it's
Yeah,
given enough
right,
time.
yeah.
Wow.
But the reason
God
why
bless.
the
God
reason why we
bless.
extended it was because our 5th anniversary fell on July 7th. We were already in Europe. We're like, we should just make this into a bigger anniversary trip.
Awesome.
And yeah, 5th anniversary. That maybe by the 10th anniversary we'll ask for another favor, but that's we'll see.
Well,
see
you
about
really
that.
set yourself
Mom
up.
and
I
Dad
mean, you're
better
in
have
year
some good
5. Year
Christmases.
6, she's going to be expecting something, JJ. Come on now. I mean,
I-
you go to Europe, it's whew,
we'll
you set
go-
that
we'll
bar
go to-
too high.
We'll go see Ellie De La Cruz in Cincinnati
you
next
go.
year.
Yeah.
Hey, I like that.
They do have the Hofbrauhaus across the street. So
There
it's
we go.
kinda like
Very
in
European.
Europe.
Yeah.
You can cheers over there. Well, welcome back, my friend.
Thank
it's
you.
It's great to have you back. I'm glad that your Europe trip was not it wasn't a total bust in terms of cancellations and flight delays. I know
Yeah.
you probably had some of that, but you got in the trip, you're back safe and sound, and now it's ready for some Colts football.
9 hours at the Newark airport to make sure we got out of Indianapolis was a challenge. But shout out to the United Club at the Newark airport for just being a great spot. Would highly recommend buying the one-day pass. If you have to spend more than like 2 hours
Yeah, you gotta do
connecting
something.
through Newark, oh
Yeah.
man, get that club pass.
For sure. The true MVP of travel right there. That is the clubs in the airport. All right. Again, Casey's here. I'm here. JJ's back. Lara's on vacation. The whole crew will reconvene once again at training camp next Tuesday. We're going to be at Colts training camp a week from today as we do the podcast next week. We'll be recapping report day, talking about practice the next day, and also recapping and reliving what Chris Ballard has to say to the media coming up a week from today. But we're loaded today. We'll talk about the return to Graham Park, and we'll also have a special conversation today. Our guest this afternoon, or on this podcast, I should say, depending on when you're listening to this, is Tom Gormely. He is the owner of Tork Sport Performance. Why are we talking to Tom Gormely? Well, he is Anthony Richardson's trainer and throwing coach, his personal coach, if you will, going into the season. So a very busy podcast per usual. Before we get into camp, just some housekeeping items to keep you up to speed on. With camp starting next week, the Colts still have 3 draft picks unsigned, Anthony Richardson being one of them, Juju Brents, who the Colts drafted in round 2 at the cornerback position, and then Blake Freeland in round 4, the offensive lineman. Those players and their agents need to sign those deals before camp next week, Casey, in order to see the field, right? In order for them to practice, they need to be signed. So it's kind of a formality. I don't think there's anything standing in the way of those deals getting done. They just haven't gotten done to this point. That's why it's a bit of a housekeeping item. So check that out on Colts.com for the latest news on that as the week progresses. But let's talk about camp. As I said, report day, move-in day next Tuesday. First practice is next Wednesday, July 26th, Colts.com/camp for all of the practice dates and the times, and to download your free ticket. Casey, for you, what are you most looking forward to at camp? Like your hype level, your excitement, where are you at going into this new season before camp starts?
So I'm pretty excited. I think I like this idea of kind of that new, it's new. You got a new coach, new quarterback, all of that. We've had new quarterbacks in the past. I'm not trying to downplay that, but I mean, this is like, in a way, you don't want to use the word rebuild, but it's kind of that retooling of your team. So I'm really excited to kind of see that develop and grow. So mainly, I think what I'm looking forward to most, if I had to pinpoint an area, I'm really looking to see where the offense is after what we saw in OTAs and vet minicamp, because I think we all agreed that the defense looked to be a little bit ahead, which is to be expected. You got a new Shane Steichen and a completely new offense coming in, new pieces. So I'm really looking forward to see kind of where that growth happened during that offseason for the guys heading into training camp.
You know, we've all been here a while. I've seen camps done by Jim Caldwell. I've seen camps done by Chuck Pagano. Certainly saw camps. We've all seen camps done by and conducted by Frank Reich. For you, JJ, what do you think camp looks like? What are some minor tweaks and some subtle changes you think we're going to see under Shane Steichen orchestrating camp?
I think how he handles the competition of it is going to be really interesting, because we don't know. I mean, this is Shane's first time running the show. And he's had influences over his career, whether it's been Norv Turner, Nick Sirianni, some of the other people he's worked with, Anthony Lynn. But I want to know how much like ones-on-ones we're going to see. How much of that real heavy competition are we going to see in the full team periods? Because, a lot of what you're doing early in camp is going to be install, right? So you're going to have ones versus twos. Like, hey, let's get these plays installed. Let's get them repped.
Yep.
When we get deeper into camp, how much of that are we going to see? Or are we going to save it for the joint practices against the Bears and the Eagles, where those are going to be where you see the real super competitive stuff come out? That part is going to be really interesting, because you have these two position groups in tight end and cornerback that are just wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like anything could happen out of those two groups. And to me, the competition that you're going to get when the tight ends are going against the linebackers or the safeties, and the corners are going against the wide receivers. How's Dallas Flowers going to handle guarding Michael Pittman Jr.? How is Kylan Granson going to handle going against Zaire Franklin, in like run blocking plays, stuff like that. Like when you get the good on good, how is that going to look? That's what I'm really interested in seeing, how Shane handles it.
And like I said, Chris Ballard is going to talk to the media on Tuesday. Really our first chance to hear extensively from Chris since, the draft, at the end of the draft. I mean, he kind of, lets the players and the coaches be front and center. both during the offseason workout program and certainly during the regular season. But when Chris talks next week, obviously some of the big questions that he's going to be asked, where's Shaq Leonard, right? Is there any update there?
Right.
Is there any progress from what we saw last in the spring? And I also want to hear about if there's playing time, if there's a plan for the preseason for the starters. I mean, it has a chance at least to be kind of tweaked and altered this year because of those joint practices, those 2 joint practices, actually 3, 2 with the Bears and then 1 with the Eagles. So how do the Colts plan to utilize starting playing time in those 3 preseason games? It's always kind of tricky. There used to be somewhat of a formula in the preseason with 4 preseason games, and then now with 3, and depending on who the head coach is and where they're at in terms of trying to mitigate injuries and where they feel they are with their starters and their depth. I mean, everybody's just kind of all over the place in terms of playing time in the preseason. And then how does Chris feel about the depth on the offensive line and the depth, to your point, JJ, in the secondary at corner? I mean, those are 2 areas where the Colts, JJ, are really projecting a lot of players. I'm interested to hear what Chris has to say about just his overall feelings on the depth and his confidence level in those pieces that are backing up the starters going into camp.
Yeah, you know, I think what you'll probably hear Chris say is something he said a lot, which is you're always building your roster. You can always construct your roster really through about mid-October is kind of when, you know, you kind of hit that trade deadline type stuff, and, you know, it's tougher to build out a roster after that. But that to me is really interesting is, you know, hey, if you get to the middle of camp and you're just like, do we just need a veteran? Is that something that the Colts would consider? I think the answer is probably yes, just because, again, Chris Ballard has shown a willingness to, you know, hey, you know, we'll build our roster, we'll make tweaks to it,
right,
wherever we can, however we can. But the big thing I want to hear from him, though, is just like, what's the state of Anthony Richardson going into camp? What did he see from Anthony during the spring that, you know, he feels like maybe built a base for training camp? Like, was it as expected? Was there areas where he you know, exceeded expectations? Were there areas where he maybe didn't meet expectations? And just kind of like where the number 4 overall pick stands going into camp, kind of set that baseline of what we can expect to see over the next couple of weeks up at Grand Park.
Also, too, Casey, you know we're going to be hearing questions, and I get it, and rightfully so, because it's a huge storyline, and this guy means so much to the overall health offensively for the Colts. Where are the Colts at with Jonathan Taylor in a possible contract extension, considering what happened just yesterday as we tape this on Tuesday? Monday, some of the star backs in the league, right? You had Barkley, you had Jacobs. They didn't get long-term deals from the Raiders and the Giants, respectively, and you know that's going to be asked about 85 times in camp, is how that impacts Jonathan Taylor. And I don't know if talks are going on or if they will go on. I mean, we're going to find out, I'm sure, from Chris, but you know that's going to be asked repeatedly coming up by the media the next 2-3 weeks before we start the regular season here.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we're going to, as JJ alluded to, what Chris always talks about in building the roster, he's probably going to say what he always says, is going to keep the contract talks kind of, you know, inside the building. And I'm assuming that's kind of the way it's going to go. I'm biased because we're here. I watched Jonathan Taylor, and I continue to say the same thing, that he is different from the other guys. I know Saquon Barkley it's a pretty close comparison for what they mean to that offense. I think we saw it in full force when the Colts took on the Giants last year, how important a guy like Saquon Barkley is to everybody else. So he's definitely a guy that you can put in that mold as very important to an offense. But Jonathan Taylor, I'm always a Jonathan Taylor fan. I love him as a guy, as a player. So I'm sure that's going to be a question that everybody is anxious to see what happens if there is a resolution, you know, as far as an extension happens now or if we do wait till later. But that is definitely, you're right. It's going to be asked in probably 10 different ways to try to get him to say one thing that's different from another answer on how he responds. But, you know, that is one thing we're all going to be anxious awaiting to hear. Shaq Leonard, that, and Anthony Richardson. So if you're listening to Chris Ballard a week from today, get ready for those 3 questions in a bunch of different ways, because that's probably what it's going to be a lot of.
No doubt about that. All right, let's fast forward to the first day of practice next week. So let's pretend like it's next Wednesday. And I know the Colts won't be out there in full pads, but it's going to be our first chance to see everybody on the field together, including Anthony Richardson. So with camp starting, rank these storylines, if you will, in order in terms of where your eyeballs are going to be gravitating towards first. And if I don't have a storyline that you think should be on there, let's just do a write-in ballot, okay? So we talked about Shaq Leonard's availability. Anthony Richardson's playing time to begin camp, right? His snaps versus Gardner Minshew's snaps. Will we see Richardson cut down on mistakes made during the spring? Like you said, JJ, how about secondary playing time at cornerback between guys like Dallas Flowers and Darrell Baker Jr., Brents and Darius Rush, right? Can Brents make up valuable time missed in the spring to grab one of those starting outside corner spots? The Colts wide receivers improve more, I should say, collectively from last season, and hopefully quarterback stability will contribute to that as well, because you had some playmakers missing some time in the spring, like Michael Pittman and Mo Alley Cox and Jelani Woods. Alec Pierce missed some time. Josh Downs had the hamstring. And then the last one I had is the offensive line gelling at the beginning of camp. New position coach Tony Sperano now leading that group. And will Bernhard Raimann close the door on the competition for his spot at left tackle, right? Will he grab the bull by the horns on that and say, this spot is mine, this is what I've been groomed for, this is what I've been working towards all offseason? So those storylines, rank those in order. I know I threw a lot at you, JJ.
Yeah.
And any other ones that should be on there that didn't make my initial list.
So I think if we're looking at the things I'm going to look for first, number one is obviously going to be the quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
How are the reps divided up? Because that's something that, you know, the stuff I look for first is the stuff that I want to track throughout camp, how it develops. So that's going to be number one. I think number two then becomes who's getting the first crack at being starting outside corners, and start tracking that throughout camp. Does it change a week into camp, 2 weeks into camp?
Right.
Does it not change at all because the people who started at the outside corner spots at camp hang on to it throughout camp? Number three is going to be Shaq Leonard's availability. That's one where, okay, what is he able to do? How can we start tracking that at the start of camp and see what progress he makes from July 26th through August 17th? The pass catchers one I think is really interesting because there are so many different ways that could go. I know we've talked about it a little bit with, you know, the Colts could be an 11 personnel heavy team with 3 wide receivers on the field and 1 tight end. Or they could be a 12 personnel heavy team if 2 tight ends emerge out of that group and you have 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. So just kind of tracking how the personnel is grouped with those guys and just the top pass catchers. And then I think lastly out of that group is going to be offensive line. That's usually something where you want to see the same 5 guys playing together as much as possible, but you don't necessarily need to settle on that immediately. Usually, like midway through camp is where you probably want to start getting a starting 5 together. So, you know, that will be, okay, does Bernhard Raimann leave no doubt that he's starting left tackle? And then right guard, where do you go there? There's kind of an open competition there with some guys who have been here, you know, like Will Fries, you know, some guys who are new, like Emil Ekiyor, the undrafted free agent out of Alabama. Could one of the draft picks the Colts had, who, you know, is ostensibly a tackle, could they maybe slide in to the guard position? And just kind of see where that goes. So to kind of recap, quarterback 1, cornerback 2, Shaq Leonard 3, wide receiver, pass catcher 4, and O-line 5.
You know, JJ, I try to hide my answers, but I think we have the exact same list. I
Great
literally
minds.
1 through 5 is the same, and everything you said I agree with. The one thing I will add, and this is me, I think I've been bullish on it the whole time. When it comes to offensive line, I rank them 5th, and it's maybe because I've seen you got those 3 core guys with Kelly, Quentin, and Braden. I've seen them play at such a high level throughout my time here, and I am just ready for them to kind of get back to that. So I continue to say they'll bounce back. So that's kind of why, you know, when I put offensive line so low on my list, which is a very important thing, especially with Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew, you got to be able to solidify up front for those guys to be successful. But I think that is, you know, why I rank the list the way I do, because I just feel like that 5, it's going to be okay when everything rolls around.
I mean, outside of quarterback, I think you guys are spot on. But for me, it's got to be the offensive line and then the secondary. And whatever order you want to put it in doesn't matter, because I think the Colts need to stay healthy during camp at those positions.
Agreed.
Right? Because the Colts are just a few injuries away, right, from having a lot of youth and inexperience potentially blocking for a rookie quarterback, right? I mean, if Braden Smith or Bernard Ryman, if they get hurt in camp, you're going to have young guys and like a Blake Freeland, who's a rookie, a highly touted rookie, yes, in the third round, but a rookie nonetheless, playing, in important snaps and having an important role. And he's going to have an important role no matter what this season, but you get what I'm saying, right? And then and same thing in the secondary, right? If Kenny Moore gets banged up hypothetically in camp, then you have really nobody at corner, or at least in that secondary, that has played significant time in the NFL at the cornerback position. Now, these don't have to be problems per se, because you do have talent and you drafted these guys where you did for a reason, and these guys can always step up and take advantage of opportunities. But it's just the reality of where the Colts are at, and that's why those storylines for me are at the top. And then some will say, listening to this, like Shaquille Leonard's got to be number one, or at least number two behind Anthony Richardson, considering how good he is and what he means to the defense. And I'm not going to disagree with that, but I would say that you've got E.J. Speed and you've got Zaire Franklin.
Yeah.
These guys can play. Yes, of course, you want Leonard back on the field because of all the things that he can do. He can change the game, and he goes after the football. He takes it away. He takes points off the board. All of those things are absolutely dead-on accurate. But Franklin and Speed can play in this league at a very high level, and that defense can still produce at a high level with those guys in there. But
real quick, Mate, just to for our listeners, you're not playing with three linebackers on the field all that much.
Mm-hmm.
So to your point on that, your base defense is going to probably only have two linebackers. The one you're going to play on 80% of the snaps in games. It's not like Shaq is. He's a great player. You want him out there, but you can survive and do more than survive with Zaire and EJ as the two linebackers out there.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's what happened last year. E.J. Speed played a lot on defense. Obviously, Zaire Franklin was a mainstay within that unit, setting the franchise record for single-season tackles. But I'm just saying, depth on the offensive line, the secondary, that's going to be evaluated and graded every single day, given just the newness and the inexperience at those spots going into the season. All right, let's talk some more camp storylines. Let's talk more about Anthony Richardson as he gets ready to embark on his rookie training camp. Someone that's been helping him along the way is Tom Gormely. He is the owner of Tork Sport Performance. He's Anthony Richardson's trainer and throwing coach. Tom handles Richardson's performance, his medicals, his skill development, and he is his quarterback throwing development and biomechanics czar as well. And he was at the team facility during OTAs, and he is training with Richardson actually this week as we sit here and talk right now before camp. And he joined us earlier today to talk about AR and his upcoming season. Tom Gormely is our guest. He's been working out with Anthony Richardson all off season leading up to training camp next week for the Colts. Tom, thanks for the time today, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I read during the pre-draft process you worked with Richardson for about 6 hours every day, which includes this week as we sit here and talk right now going into training camp. Let's start at the beginning, if you don't mind. How did your relationship with Richardson come to be in terms of how you work with him and handle him right now, presently speaking, going into camp?
Yeah, so we have a close relationship with a few quarterback coaches around this area as well as nationally. And Anthony's longtime quarterback coach, kind of dating back to his middle school and high school days, is Denny Thompson in Jacksonville, who owns 6 Points. And so Denny had a connection with Anthony, obviously. Mm-hmm. We had worked with Denny on quarterbacks before, as well as Will Hewlett, who kind of is independent but also works with 6 Points. And so before the senior season at Florida, we got him put in contact with Anthony's team right before the season and kind of pitched our process and our development process and kind of what we had done with our NFL quarterbacks previously, what we had done obviously with Brock Purdy during the previous combine prep, and how we focused on a very individualized development platform to improve throwing biomechanics and throwing mechanics, as well as your traditional sports performance programming. And Anthony and his team kind of bought into that approach. And so we kind of knew during the senior season that once the season was over, we were going to be able to get our hands on him and get dialed in and really develop the draft process around fixing some inefficiencies, but also highlighting what he's really special at and what makes him a unicorn as both an athlete and a thrower.
All right, so a lot to unpack there. And like you said, you structure Anthony's training, his medical program, everything. So for those that don't know what that means and what all that entails, can you explain that maybe in more detail, just how you're making him better those 6 hours a day for long periods of time going into his rookie campaign?
Yeah, so I mean, every facility obviously has some comprehensive nature. Ours is tailored specifically mainly to throwers, so there's a little bit added complexity, I think, to it when it comes to biomechanical analysis and motion capture and a few other throwing-based things that we add in there. But essentially, when you have an athlete of a high level, right, whether it's our professional baseball players, our NFL quarterbacks, position players, whatnot, the goal is to build a program around them that is addressing each part of their development model and each part of their system that might be limiting or enhancing their output as an athlete. So when it comes to building a structure around him, we have a sports science system in place that takes a motion capture analysis of Anthony, basically high motion captures as well as force plates of him throwing in the beginning of his offseason or the beginning of draft prep. And from that analysis, you're going to understand what his efficiencies and inefficiencies are as a thrower. And then you need to get him on a table and you got to assess his joints and his tissue and his capsule and the mobility he has in his hips, spine, ankles, knee, shoulder, elbow, right? And figure out, is some of these limitations coming from the joint structure itself, or is it coming from motor learning, motor acquisition, how he moves as an athlete? Obviously not in Anthony's case, but in other athletes' case, is it coming from their lack of strength or their lack of power or their lack of stability? So we measure them with a force velocity profiling system that we have in-house when it comes to lifting, jumping, landing on force plates, really understanding what their reactive strength is and what their capacity is for power and power output. And when you put that all together, you get an understanding of both the athlete, but also the way the athlete moves, and then the way that the athlete's power production and movement plays into how they're able to access that throwing specifically, which in his case is what's most important as a quarterback. And you kind of put together this large structure, and then that leads to the daily environment, which is medical, that's addressing tissue limitations, tissue restrictions, capsular restrictions, or the preventative medicine side, which is making sure his hamstring stays strong, making sure that his spine stays mobile and his back stays from getting stiff and tight from all the throwing, taking care of his arm care, his arm prep, doing off his rotator cuff and periscapular strengthening, as well as all of his pre-throw and post-throw routine to warm his arm up and go through plyo drills to focus around skill acquisition and patterning drills to get him into a better pattern for when we pick up a football. And then you have all your classic training, right? All the stuff that made him run a 4.4 and jump 40 inches, right? So the classical training power output side that makes him the athlete that he is. So when you're kind of structuring all of that stuff throughout a week and you're undulating days or manipulating the days throughout a week, it ends up being, 5, 6, 7 hours each day throughout the week that some of it is turning up the athlete and being really sympathetic and getting a lot of drive and really putting out power. And then some of it being really parasympathetic and working on recovery and regeneration and tissue work and mobility work. And that's really what it takes to build a high-level system around a complex athlete, especially when you're dealing with throwers that they have all the regular demands of a football player, an NFL football player, and all these added demands of a thrower and arm care and arm health.
How has Anthony taken to that, Tom, in from the moment you got him in to now on the precipice of training camp? Because it does sound like a lot, but he also has come across as someone who is committed to whatever it takes to be a successful NFL quarterback.
Yeah, so when Anthony's in front of you, you are going to get his full attention, right? He's a quiet kid at heart, right? So he's pretty detail-oriented, but he does it in his own unique way, right? He's quiet, he's listening, he's observing, right? He's very observant. And it takes a little bit of time for Anthony to buy in to your system, not in a negative way at all, but he's asking questions. He's trying to understand why you're doing something, why he's doing something. And once he understands the why and how this is going to help with XYZ that maybe he's witnessed on the field before, he's bought into that structure, right? And not once during, I guess it was like 15 weeks, I think, leading into OTAs that we had Anthony, was like time ever a factor? Was like being in the facility too long ever a factor, or going over motion capture, or sitting down and reviewing film, reviewing throwing film, talking about why this drill should be added and this drill should be taken away? He wants to do whatever he can do to make himself successful. And as much time as that takes and as much detail as that takes, he was game for. He's still game for. We went through it today, obviously throwing out of the field and really breaking down where we've seen some shift from pro day to OTAs to post OTAs, and what we're trying to dig into to make sure that when he's back at training camp, he's back to feeling as on time and as sequenced up, because there's a lot of stuff going on around him, right? Besides the playbook and cognitive processing and learning off his teammates and learning terminology, it's really making sure that the sequencing and the design of the throwing system around him that will get him into the best places and the best feelings is still there. And he never asks a question about, like, how long is this going to be? When's it going to be over? You know, when he's there, he's bought in, he's detail-oriented, and that's always fun to work with.
Now, one of the things we constantly hear from young guys as they make their way to the NFL, you get in combine shape, and then it takes you a little bit of time to get into that NFL shape. From your standpoint, when you first got your hands on Anthony and you're getting him into, quote-unquote combine shape to get him to, in these pre-draft, everything to get his stock so high, how different is that from where we are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think with quarterbacks, they're sometimes a little different because on both sides, sometimes they're not doing anything physically at the combine where Anthony did. We wanted to showcase what he could do physically, right?
Right.
But our process is a little bit different here. And what I mean by that is we really don't train them, between myself and Will, we don't train them for the combine. We actually train them that entire time, very similar to how we program our NFL offseason, right? So we're basically digging into an NFL offseason program and running into the combine with that. Because to our opinion, to our athletes, is that this is the most uninterrupted time you will ever get to develop as a better thrower, a better quarterback, and a better athlete, probably in your entire career. And so spending that entire time focused around 3 drills athletically and 10 routes is kind of a waste of time in our opinion, right? So instead, we spend that time developing what we find really important that we already do with our NFL quarterbacks. And towards the very end, we worry about just peaking to the combine or peaking to specific tasks that are going to be at the combine. But realistically, we're not overly focused on the NFL combine. We're focused on developing the best NFL quarterback. So really, after the combine, we just kind of pick up with the off-season training, and there's not that big of transition, at least in our side.
Tom, I alluded to this a little bit earlier. Maybe I put the cart in front of the horse, but what's your involvement been with the Colts? Because I said I know you're at OTAs in the spring with Richardson. Yeah. What kind of relationship do you have with the Colts and Shane Steichen, and how do the Colts view this partnership, if you will, trying to get the best out of Anthony Richardson from every angle?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in the past, we've obviously worked with Gardner, and we've also worked with Anthony. So we just so happened had 2 of your guys' quarterbacks now. And then Sam's down here now. So now I guess we have the whole quarterback room in some capacity from us, right? But they had obviously, we chatted with them during the draft process as they were getting to know Anthony, and they had kind of heard and seen what we did with like our motion capture analysis and how we tried to build customized plans around each thrower. And so the last week of OTAs, they brought myself and Chris Hessen, who is a motion capture analyst that consults with a few different NFL teams, and kind of wanted to see us go through the process with quarterbacks. Like, what did we do during our offseason processes? How do we take this motion capture analysis and just kind of explain what we see in motion capture, what we see with deficiencies, inefficiencies, things that those athletes are really good with, and how we then structure design around them. And that like symbiotic relationship, that back and forth conversation, that collaborative nature between like your private staff that you have in the off season and the team staff is what really makes it seamless transition for the athlete. So it's in the athlete's best interest. We can speak the same language, we get friendly with each other, and in the long term, it helps out the athlete because it seems like a much more steady transition instead of feeling very disjointed where you have just like team thinking this over here and then like off season performance thinking this. So really just getting us together, collaborating ideas, sharing ideas, understanding where Anthony, Gardner, and the bunch come from, and where we like to see them going, what we've seen success with, and where they can implement that while the season goes on.
When you've coached up Anthony and you've gone through these drills and all these things, just how have you seen him absorb the coaching? You mentioned, that he has your full attention when you're talking to him, but actually applying the teachings you're giving him and growing from them, how have you seen that process go with Anthony?
Yeah, so the way we teach is we use, like in a fancy term, dynamic systems theory or constraint-based learning or dynamic ecologics. They're all fancy terms for basically saying you're trying to teach movement and systems to an organism by constraining pieces of their movement or their environment or their task so that they can find the optimal way to solve the problem. So instead of saying like lift your arm or throw more flat or rotate your hip, which might be a part of it, we try to use a drill-based scenario in which you can give them plyometric drills or overloaded or underloaded implements and use pieces of the movement in order to constrain their movement pattern so that they can find a more efficient pattern. So what that really relies on from Anthony is trust in us that what we're trying to teach and move and alter is the correct thing, because essentially you're trying to like a little bit of their throwing pattern, right? So you got to build trust with the athlete first. And then number two, it's really about feedback from him. Because instead of me coaching him or Will coaching him and telling him what to do, we're often giving him plyo drills or med ball drills or exercises in the weight room that should shape improved movement patterns. And we explain what the pattern we want is, and we let him discover the best and most efficient way to shape it under load. And then once we put the football in your hand, we don't really want to do much talking. We want feedback from the athlete and see if they can feel the disassociation or the new hip pattern or the decel in the front leg. And when we see a good result of a good ball, we want to know what they felt from that result. And then after that feeling, that allows us to adjust and manipulate what drills or what patterning we're going to use in the future. And so Anthony has always been someone that will throw probably first rep, not say anything, second rep, not say anything, but he might repeat it or mimic it with like a dry throw, and you kind of get to learn your athlete, right? So you kind of know that that's him thinking through the rep, and then throw maybe the third rep, and then he'll give us feedback on it, and then we might ask a directed question, and he has an answer. He's like, no, I didn't feel this, or hey, that felt good. What did I do differently there, right? Like he is inquisitive. He wants to know. He knows what he wants to feel, and he's picked up over time, obviously, a really dense understanding of like what he wants to feel, what is efficient mechanics, what is inefficient mechanics. And he is actually an extremely natural thrower of the football, right? He, contrary to maybe like some things pre-draft process when there was like articles written about him about like different inaccuracy issues and how he threw. Well, like that's not the case. If you have motion capture data on him, if you understand throwing sequencing, he is a natural thrower of the ball. He understands how to lead that throw with his pelvis. He understands how to get into efficient hip-shoulder separation. He has a good arm path. It's really little pieces to his puzzle of deceleration and playing a little bit flatter and allowing natural arm patterning to happen and not trying to throttle his throw so much with his arm or with his front knee, but instead just at which the rate at which he rotates, right? So it was little pieces to the puzzle that you're basically nudging him and tinkering with drills. And all it takes from him is the buy-in to understand what we want him doing, which he always has, and he's always asked directed questions, and he's always been open and honest with his feel. And if you get that from an athlete, it's really impactful to how you can develop really custom programs for them. So obviously in all, like he was bought in from day one. He's been bought in. He's trusted us through the process. He's obviously seen the results as the process was going on. He was spinning it better. He was throwing it better. He was feeling accurate. He felt like he could do anything with the football on the run, on the move, whatever. Once the athlete sees that and gets that buy-in from themselves because they see it, obviously, then you just take off. And those last 5-6 weeks of combine prep and pro day prep, and then eventually into OTAs were really special. Obviously, he was spinning it at an elite rate, and that's obviously where we're trying to carry it all the way through the season now.
I think, fans listening to this here in Indianapolis are probably going to wonder about how this all helps Richardson's accuracy, because you mentioned he's a natural thrower of the football. His velocity on his throws it seems like it's top tier. The drills he's been going through, have you noticed Anthony being more accurate, where you're just kind of tweaking these little things biomechanically that will lead to more consistent accuracy with the football?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, yes, right? And, obviously, yes, there were some accuracy issues. I do think some of the accuracy issues are overblown, personally. Mm-hmm. If you go back and actually watch all of the film and you see some balls that are, not caught in windows that were tight and the ball was placed in a good window, you know what I'm saying? Balls hit your hands, drops. When you, I think, encounter everything, the accuracy issues are a little bit overblown, but Anthony will be the first one to tell you, too. He wasn't the most accurate on certain balls. And a lot of it could be tied usually into little faults, right? So some throttling the throw with his arm, right? Him trying to decelerate or accelerate his arm at release was one of the first things we saw. And that obviously creates a two-way miss, right? So you're pulling your arm through the zone and trying to almost guide it or aim it to a spot. And that's one of the easiest ways to be inaccurate. You can't aim to a spot. You got to throw it to a spot. And you need your system to be organized in a very efficient, tight window to when you say go and you rip your hip and then your arm follows, you just release it. And so that's obviously the first thing to work on. And then the second thing is we notice a little bit of over-rotation. He actually moves his pelvis so well and he's so powerful that he would get a little over-rotated on his left side. So he would almost keep rolling out of a throw and never have a firm stop point with his front side. And that causes your arm to obviously create this right to left motion continuously. And you got to kind of pick the perfect time to let go of that ball. And so working on those little pieces to the system and understanding what does it feel like to block with your lead leg and really decelerate so that your arm only has one window to release from starts to you start to see him okay, out route, ... right? Instead of okay, a little low, a little bit behind, and then a dot, right? He didn't need to feel it out as much. The first throw was accurate. And that's obviously the part that you want to get to. And we saw that improvement leading into OTAs, and then you go through OTAs, and now he's back kind of in the pre-training camp time frame. And some of it hangs around perfectly, and obviously any thrower, throwing is like a golf swing. It's a sequence. So you always kind of go, you go in and out of it a little bit. You get a little bit off pattern, and you just have the right drills and the right little things to kind of bump you back into the feeling of being efficient again, right? And that's the key to understanding is that all throwers are always working on something. They're always working on their accuracy. They're always working on sequencing. At any level, the highest level, they could be a 10-year NFL vet. They're always still working on maintaining a good swing, right, or a good stroke when it comes to throwing. And that's where he is, right? It's just that continued maintenance now that he knows the feel of good sequencing. When he's on and he feels good, he's dotting balls all over the place. It's just maintaining that now, right, and finding a structure for him that maintains it throughout the season.
Final thing for me, and this might sound like a really dumb question, but I just want to know, when you hear the outside noise, everybody's an expert. They have all the answers on how to make Anthony Richardson this quarterback. He has to do this, this, and this. When you look at it from being the actual expert and you're working on stuff, does any of that stuff ever creep in? And when it does, right now, one of the big topics right now is his footwork. How much of that outside noise are you guys well aware of prior to it?
I mean, I'll be honest with you, in our team, when it comes to Denny, myself, Will, the guys around Anthony on the training side, AJ, my strength coach here, we're kind of like the athletes, essentially, meaning I'm not paying much attention to anything when it comes to what the media is putting out or what Twitter's saying, right? We don't care because we have the data, essentially, right, through capturing his motion of what we know we want to work on, right? And he's not perfect. No athlete's perfect. We know there's limitations in certain areas and there's things to work on. You also don't fix everything in one night, right? You don't fix everything in 3 weeks. It's a continuous process of learning and developing throughout your career. And Anthony understands that too, right? And he also knows he's going to make mistakes. That's right. Going to be part of the process. But he is continually improving day in and day out. And that's what you want. You want data backing up what you see with your eyes, and then you're using that data and that assessment to make actionable change. And as long as we continue to make actionable change with him for the better, you'll continue to get a better, more efficient quarterback. And so, yeah, we're the most critical, right? Just like the athletes are the most critical of themselves, we're the most critical of Anthony, right? And he knows that, and we will talk exactly about what we think is efficient and inefficient and what's working and not working. So we're always looking for ways to optimize their movement, their game, their throwing. And we're not just here playing fan of Anthony. We're obviously super close with him, but it's our job to make sure that he's as good as he can be. And with that comes having a critical eye, and he's always down for that. He wants to hear what he can do to get better. And so I'm not sure that we're concerned about the outside noise, right? Because we're trying to figure it out on our own anyway, right? We're trying to figure out what we think is efficient and inefficient.
Tom, last one. You've been so gracious with your time. We've certainly learned so much. It's been, I can only speak for myself, really eye-opening, this whole process and all that you do to help players like Anthony Richardson and, as you said, Gardner Minshew and Sam Ehlinger. But this is a loaded question. I understand that. But this is kind of coupling off of JJ's question earlier. But what gives you confidence that Anthony can succeed and have success as a rookie? And I'm not talking about the physical tools, more so of what JJ talked about earlier, talking about the ability to handle all that comes with playing quarterback and handling that position at the highest level, not only dealing what you have to deal with on Sundays, but Monday to Saturday, media and marketing and the locker room and being a leader. What gives you confidence character-wise in Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I'm going to just kind of give you the easy answer, which you just told me I wasn't allowed to answer, but I'm going to answer it, which is that he's an absolute unicorn, right? He's the best athlete to ever play that position. And so you have literally a unicorn playing quarterback, right? He can do anything physically. And that is a get-out-of-jail-free card, right? That is what that is. But on the flip side, when you go, hey, I want to have still the ability to be an elite classical quarterback, which is what he wants to be, right? He doesn't want to just utilize his freak nature, right? He wants to be really, really good and really, really efficient the way you see all the great quarterbacks right now doing it. And then he knows he has this other gear and other capacity, right, to be able to run and jump over you and run over you, right? Like, he's a big, strong, powerful individual. But when you know Anthony, right, and you get to know Anthony, his personality is so engaging, and he leads in a unique way, right? He's not going to be a rah-rah guy. Like, that is not who he's going to be. But he is an extremely caring individual, right? Like, he cares about everything, about his family, about his circle around him, about his teammates, about his team. And that ability to truly care for other people, be empathetic, is what will help him be a leader of that team, because he wants to succeed. He wants to see other people succeed. Mm-hmm. He wants to see his team succeed. And that natural drive he has in himself, like, he wants to be great. He doesn't want to just be an NFL player. He wants to be great, and he wants to listen to people. He wants to learn from people. He's incredibly young, as you guys know, right? He's incredibly inexperienced, as you guys know, right? He has not played a bunch of quarterback in his entire life, like going back to high school. And so all of that is going to have bumps in the road. He's going to have learning curve, especially at the NFL. We know that, right? But he is a resilient dude that is willing to put in work, willing to put in effort, and willing to take criticism. He's willing to take coaching. He's willing to take hard information and put work in to improve it. And at the end of the day, all you're looking for from an athlete is the ability to take the coaching and work his ass off to improve, right? And that is what he's really good at doing. And when you take that and you mix in this unicorn athlete, then you have a really, really special ability. So we're obviously excited to watch him put it on display when he gets his chance to play, right? Whether it's right away or whether it's a little bit into the season, whatever it is, he'll be prepared, and he loves putting on a show, right? Like, he loves the spotlight. He loves the pressure. You saw him at the combine. That is Anthony, right? Like, when it's time to run the 40, when everybody, and I think people don't really understand, like, the pressure behind that. There's a lot that goes into running a 40, especially when for the last 10 weeks, all we heard is how he's going to break the combine. He's going to have the best 40 of all time. Like, all that stuff. Like, there's some pressure on you then to go do it, right? To go make sure that run you hit, right? The difference between 4.42, whatever he ran, and 4.55 is not that different. So in order to really be lightning quick, it's like everything has to be right. The warm-up, the intent, the focus, the preparation, and then it's time to put on a show. When you put on a show, he's having fun, right? So we always say an Anthony that's having fun, and Anthony that's dancing. And that Anthony is a dangerous Anthony, right? And that's it. It's keeping the game fun for himself. It's keeping himself energized and energetic around it, and understanding there's going to be bumps in the road. You're going to have mistakes, but you keep that confidence, you keep that swagger, you keep making plays, and you have fun. And when he's having fun, he's dangerous. And so obviously we're excited to hear what he does.
For sure. Tom, thank you so much for your time, man. If this sports performance stuff doesn't work out for you, I think you have a career in motivational speaking.
Agreed.
Let's go. I'm ready. I'm ready for camp. I mean, you can mold me. I'm a ball of clay, Tom. Let's see what we can do, pal.
Maybe it's a secondary career, but honestly, if you think about it, because I'm also a physical therapist, right? So a lot of your life as a PT, like on the PT side of stuff and on the training side, is psychology, right? I mean, we have it's like there's no doubt that whether it doesn't matter if it's Anthony or any of our guys, right? If you're with me for 15 weeks, 5-6 days a week, for 7 hours a day, like you're gonna have some down days, right? Like just in general, just the drag of the process is going to get to you, right? So it's making sure that your athletes understand the why behind everything, right? And if you understand the why and you understand that, like, hey, we believe in you, we're buying into you, we're bringing the energy for you when you can't bring it, that is what makes a successful relationship over the long term. And when an athlete trusts you and you have the right scientific backing behind your programming, that's where you really see development happen. And obviously, I think that's been the case with a lot of our quarterbacks here with our system. And Anthony's no different.
No doubt about that. You can definitely sense the trust in Anthony and Anthony's trust in you based on how you speak about him, based on how you talk about your relationship. So tell Gardner and Anthony and Sam we all said hello. Looking forward to seeing those guys next week at camp. And pleasure speaking with you and meeting you over the phone, getting your experiences working with all those guys. Continued success, and thank you so much for squeezing us in during your busy schedule here.
For sure, no problem. Look forward to seeing them succeed out there and you all having success out in Indy.
That's Tom Gormely from Tork Sport Performance. Some fascinating insight right there from Tom, his work with Anthony Richardson and his development and improvement, even from the offseason workout program heading into training camp. A lot has been done. A lot has been accomplished. So looking forward to the fruits of Tom's work with Anthony starting next week in training camp. And you can tell everything that Tom and Anthony have been working on, quite intentional. No randomness there. Unlike our random thought of the week to close out from JJ.
Random thought of the week.
And why is the carpet all wet, Todd?
I don't know, Margot.
You guys going out of town? You know if it's cold there? Do these vans get good gas mileage?
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
All right, JJ, you were gone for 8 days. You're a world traveler now. You saw some culture. You observed some different ways of life. Surely something random popped in your brain over the course of a 2-week hiatus on vacation.
Do I drink enough water or do I not drink enough water? Or does it matter? So that's where we're going.
Wait a minute.
Love
it. This is not a health podcast.
No. Okay, so
this isn't Dr. Oz.
Europe does a lot of things well. Their nap culture, undefeated. We need to bring in European nap culture.
They also have a different work schedule, right?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Like the European work schedule, their attitude toward work, so much better than America. Not even close. Naps, encouraged. It's a great continent.
Not as much stress.
No. The one thing Europeans do way
Why the hell did you come back?
Yeah, I know. Well, for this.
Okay.
Europeans don't drink enough water. You go to a restaurant, you go to a cafe in Europe, and they'll give you this teeny little glass and a bottle of water.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go. And, like, I come back to America, and you go to a restaurant, and you get a pint glass full of water.
Yep.
I'm sitting here with my Stanley mug, like, because I'm very basic, and it's 40 ounces of water.
Yep.
And I chug through a couple of those a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, oh boy, I'm back in America. I can drink water again. This is great. And then I read an article that was basically like, you know that whole rule of like you're supposed to drink 8 glasses of 8 ounces of water a day? It's just BS. Doesn't even matter. So I'm like, wait a minute. Am I drinking too much water? Am I not drinking enough water? Who's right about water consumption, Europeans or Americans? I have no idea now.
Wow.
My brain is scrambled. I think it's still Americans because I like, drinking water's good, but it has apparently no health benefits. Other than if you're thirsty, you should drink water. But the Europeans, it's like 89, 95 degrees in France, and like everyone's sweating bullets, and I'm like, where's the water?
Give me a beer.
Give me water.
No, okay, everyone just drinks wine, and I'm like, that's great, except like wine doesn't keep you hydrated.
Yeah.
I need water.
That's interesting.
According to healthandwellness.com, 3.7 liters per day is recommended for men. 15 and a half cups.
Okay, there we go. Thank
or
you.
125 ounces. For women, It's 11.5 cups, 91 ounces. This says about 20% of your daily fluid intake usually comes from food. The rest you get from drinks, but instead of counting how many ounces you're drinking, listen to your body. Drink when you're thirsty. Try to consume water slowly throughout the day. Casey, you're always drinking water.
I'm
you
a
do
big
good.
water guy. So for me, like I like a soda, don't get me wrong, but like there are times when and I love my water ice cold. Like I want it so cold that
That's
almost
something you're not
feel
getting
it.
in Europe.
Yeah, so I would
Yep.
I'm that guy that when I go to a restaurant, and this is no stab at because I do like fine dining, but a lot of times you'll go to a place and you'll give you the pitcher of water without ice in it, and they'll pour it into my glass, and I'm like, I don't want to be the guy that asks for ice, but I really need this to be colder. And they're like, well, we just got it from I was like, I understand that you got it from a cold place, but I want to stay in that cold place the entire time. Like
you like the ice on your lips?
Oh,
100%.
Like
you wanted to touch your teeth?
Like I almost want it to hurt going down. I want it so cold that I'm like, you know what? I want it
like
even
my
colder
liquid
than that.
to hurt, to burn.
Exactly. So when it comes to water, I love ice cold water. Now, room temperature water, I'm good. I don't drink it. I will pass it. So for me, more water the better, but it's got to be really, really cold.
Are you guys water snobs when it comes to bottled water?
No.
Like you have to buy Ice Mountain or it has to be Dasani.
Nope.
My wife is very much a water snob. She will only buy Ice Mountain.
That's how my brother was growing up.
If they don't have Ice Mountain, she will settle for a Kroger brand. And listen, I'm sure it comes from different places. That's why they can sell it. That's why they can market it. Listen, 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, right?
Right.
I'm good. It's water is water. It's an essential part of your life.
That's funny because I'm one of those, like, I'm not like a brand snob, but there are certain things, like when it comes to ketchup, it's either Heinz or Hunt's. I don't go anywhere else. I don't get the Kroger brand. But with water, I don't care.
The thing is, I feel like I can taste the difference sometimes when you get that bottle of Fiji that's like $8 at the airport.
No, I'm not that sophisticated.
But like you get that once, you're like, yeah, I can taste the difference compared to the Kroger brand. But then I'm like, but it's still just water,
right?
So who cares?
Right.
Like it's not like me going between eating a grocery store steak that you're putting ranch dressing on versus going to St. Elmo's.
How about that? We always go back to that, right? We can always find a parallel to bring that back in, can't we? Good for us. That's awesome. I feel great about myself. Fan-freaking-tastic. Well, there's going to be a lot of water consumed up at training camp.
Oh, yes, there will
How
be.
about that
hydrated.
For a segue? It's going to be hot.
That'll be Dasani. I think
fine by me.
Okay.
Dasani is the water that they provide to us in the media.
Better be cold though, or else Casey Vallier is going to have his pitchfork. It's going to be over on Matt Conti saying, "I need more ice, Conti.
Give me ice."
I know you got a lot of media here, but this water's warm." Holy smokes. Speaking of camp, we're going to be loaded up at camp. As we said earlier, our podcast will originate from Graham Park in Westfield for the next couple of weeks. Chris Ballard is going to talk to the media on Tuesday, so a full recap of that coming up next week on our podcast. The Colts Reunion podcast, that closes out for the summer this week. Myself and Bill Brooks, our guest this week, Ray Donaldson, one of the great Colts centers of all time. 1980s, 1990s player, played 17 years in the NFL. So a great conversation with Ray this week up on the Colts Audio Network. We've also had great conversations with Dallas Clark, Adam Vinatieri, Anthony Costanzo, and Edgerrin James on top of our conversation with Ray Donaldson. So check all of those out this week on the Colts Audio Network. Kind of scroll back into the feed to pull those up, those conversations that happened earlier in the summer. And then the last word is back this week. Myself and Jeffrey Gorman will preview Colts training camp coming up next week and have a look around the AFC South and the Colts with former NFL GM Randy Mueller. He is now in the XFL, but does a great job covering the NFL for The Athletic, putting all of his work in the NFL front offices to good use. Guys, what do you got going on this weekend, your last weekend before things start to get nuts? JJ, how you going out with a big bang here?
Gonna just spend some time with the family.
Yep.
And, go do some stuff. We went to the Children's Museum last weekend. Maybe turn out the zoo. Just try to get, squeeze in the rest of that family time, which, by the way, I think the Colts coaches are doing this week. Just spending more time with family. Hey, knowing that once we get up to training camp, there's not a whole lot of time.
No.
That's the grind of the season. That's the work you get into. But
no doubt.
Really credit to, Shane Steichen and the Colts for really emphasizing that time with your family before training camp.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important to get that, and hopefully I can get a little bit of it here this weekend as well.
Well, I think I'm going to be hitting up the Hamilton County 4-H Fair this weekend up in my neck of the woods up north. My wife has a baby shower, and I've got a beer and diaper party that is like family included, so I'm going to bring the boys to the beer and diaper party.
We don't need a repeat of the 4th of July.
No.
Right? Come on now.
This is not going to be that. I know JJ missed out. I'll have to clue you in off camera. That was a rough one, JJ, for me in the 4th. I don't really remember too much of it. But anyway.
More diapers than beer.
Yes,
this weekend.
More diapers than beer. But yeah, that's what I got.
That's how the ratio needs to play out. Well, have fun, boys. Enjoy time with the family, soak it in, and get ready for football. Training camp starts next Tuesday, first practice Wednesday. Again, one final time, Colts.com/camp for the practice dates and times and to download your free ticket. For JJ, Casey, I'm Matt Taylor. Thanks for listening to the official Colts podcast brought to you by WynnBet, and we will talk to you next week. Football's here on the Colts Audio Network. So long, everybody.